Welcome to the Ages of Rock podcast with your hosts Bill Algie, Dennis Talbot, and Alan Tate. We are three guys who have one thing in common, a love of rock and roll. Our goal is to talk about all things rock. We hope you find this show intriguing, funny, and occasionally highly opinionated. Enjoy!
Hey, I am here today with our buddy Todd Kerns, who plays in just about every band you can imagine, which is awesome. And I think I think you can tell that by the background, man. You got quite a little setup there with a guitar or two.
Yeah, it's like living in the back room of a Sam Ash. See if we can get more. Like, yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous actually. It's this is only part of it. It's mostly in storage or in warehouse. But this is what I have in the house currently. I try to switch it out now and then because I'm like, it feels kind of like if you're going to ignore your guitars, they should probably be in the hands of somebody else.
Yeah, probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, somebody who can make good use of them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, are those ones that you take out on the road, or are those just home ones that you usually? Those are ones to mess around with at home, or special ones, probably.
Yeah, these ones don't really, I've never even plugged in this Eddie Van Halen guitar. I bought that several years ago. I don't really play those kind of Floyd Rose type guitars at all. So, but of course, you look one glance at that sort of iconic guitar and then it's like, yeah, I have to have that. And then, of course, he passed, and then that made it even more, important. I've been meaning to find some sort of way to display it in more of a important way, but it's good to have. But yeah, most of this is like all my touring stuff is in LA. Actually, it's sort of all in sort of our storage unit for the Slash camp for now. But but that said, there are a few pieces here and there that make their way back. But yeah, most of this is just stuff at the house.
Nice. And you're in Vegas, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
I assumed as much.
16 years in Vegas. Hard to believe. Yeah.
Wow. So when I come out there next time, I'll have to ask you where not to go. Or better yet, where I really should go and not the places, not the touristy bull crap that we all get stuck in. But there's been over the time I've found enough people that live out there that can tell me a couple of different places, so it's pretty cool. But
yeah, I'm not very the funny thing is I spend so much of my life out, like on the road and traveling and whatnot, that when I come back to Vegas or when I come home, I tend to spend most of my time. Hang on, turn my light on here. Look at that. Spend most of my time just sort of at home. I don't really I'm not really much of a. I mean, when I say that, I mean a lot of my friends. I have so many friends that live in Vegas that are like they really partake in the nightlife and all the stuff. Or more restaurants, some shows. Like we like to see shows now and again and that kind of thing. But it's one of the advantages of living in a town like this is that there's always something. I'm not sure what's going on tonight, but I'm sure if I open my phone and look, I can find something. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't find anything, man, God love you.
Yeah, exactly. You're in the wrong town. Yeah.
You're in the wrong town. It's pretty funny that way. It's the city that never sleeps kind of thing. There's always
pretty
something
much,
going on for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
So you've got a new project. Which is awesome. And by the way, sometime you got to take Took on the road in America. I know this is not what we're supposed to talk about today, but damn, that band is so awesome. And the stuff you put out is great, but I'd love to see those guys do a tour. It'd be awesome.
I would too, actually. It's something we've been sort of trying to chip away at. A lot of it, like everything else, like Heroes and Monsters and even Slash and the gang, is everybody has so many other things going on that it's nearly impossible to get everybody on the same page. But it does occur. And I think that at some point we'll be able to do at least some kind of run or some kind of run of shows here or there that I think would make sense. Even the Bruce Kulick band. I mean, honestly, it's like everybody, all these projects that I do, everybody's always like, how do you manage to work it all in? And I go, well, because it's also kind of intermittent. You know what I mean? Like it's like with Took, it's guys from a bunch of different things. And when those other things sort of fire back up, we have to kind of, sort of pick and choose our battles. And the same goes for Heroes and Monsters, and the same goes for Slash, and the same goes for all points in between. The Bruce Kulick band,
Yeah. I had a similar conversation with Jeff Pilson. Jeff's
Oh yeah.
He's always got 3 or 4 or 5 projects going on, and it's amazing. I'm like, dude, I don't know how you do it. I mean, I don't know how you keep it straight and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
know.
it's the same thing. Yeah.
He's impressive too, because I don't think he, in something like Foreigner that takes up the lion's share of his time and all that, I think he probably doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to. And I think he's like me, where it's sort of like we do these things because it's what we do. It's like you feel like, yeah, I just love playing music. It's, and then in town when I'm home this weekend, I'll be doing that Rating the Rock Vault show here in Vegas, and I love just playing music, getting up and singing and playing songs is what I do. So if I can have the opportunity to do so, then I will probably do that chosen over, sitting on the couch, and I love sitting on the couch. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I lean right into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I've seen that show. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it was a neat show. It's been probably maybe 10 years, something like that.
It's much different
quite
now,
a while. Yeah. So I haven't been out there for a little while, but next time I get out there, I definitely want to see that, because you just never know who's going to show up, which is kind of cool.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And
I mean, Blas Elias will be back now. Blas was out with Trans-Siberian Orchestra, so he'll be back. So I'm excited to see him, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a great place for you guys to be able to get together and jam and have a good time and stuff like that. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So Heroes and Monsters. So how did you come up with this band? How did this band kind of form?
Well, it initially sort of came about during lockdown, believe it or not. Like around 2021, probably 6 months to a year into lockdown, when it took me a long time to unwind, took me a long time to kind of lean into that idea of like, oh, we can just kind of like sit around and not do anything. Well, that's great. I was still in that mode of like, oh, I've got to do this and I got to do that. And that, and then just when Will reached out and was like, hey, I'm doing this thing, what do you think? And I'm like, well, send it over, let's hear what you guys are working on. And then that turned into Locked and Loaded, and then another song, another song, another song. I mean, honestly, without COVID, I mean, the only silver lining to that bloody thing was how much music I became a part of, and how much creativity that just sort of kind of spewed forth from that, because it was, most of us had no idea what to expect. I mean, there was all kinds of people saying how we're never going to tour again, there's never going to be any shows, all that kind of sort of doom saying. And I was like, okay, well, I guess if that's the case, that's the case. But I could still write and I could still record. So, I did a record called Minefield with a couple guys from Ace Frehley's band, which was a blast, and then I did and then Heroes and Monsters. Tracy Guns and I got a project coming out. So it's just like that kind of thing of like, had that not happened, I wouldn't be doing any of this. And of course, at the time when people are like, well, how do you do all these things? I'm like, well, in that moment, the only thing going on was Heroes and Monsters. It was like that. It wasn't even called that at the time, but it was literally the only thing on my plate. I was just sort of, yeah, sure. I mean, Took was writing and doing some stuff during COVID as well, but everything was remote. We weren't really meant to be with people. So doing it all remotely was really the only option.
Yeah, it's amazing to think back. Had that whole shutdown occurred even 10, 12, 15 years ago, it would have been a totally different experience for everybody. I mean, yeah, the internet was there, but it wasn't as you weren't able to do the things you can do today.
Not at all.
No, I mean, it'd have had a completely different, impact on the entire world. I mean, it would have been devastating to some, for sure. Not that it wasn't, it was, but still, I mean, in a much bigger scale of things, I think.
Yeah. Imagine it like back when you had to go renting DVDs, or, like when you didn't have Netflix and Hulu and everything else. It was sort of more a case of like, no, you are absolutely stuck in your house, and, we're going to just have to make do. It was definitely a like, I keep thinking to myself, well, this kind of recording was basically impossible, short of taking a 2-inch tape, boxing it up and mailing it to, Steph Burns in Milan, Italy, and then him sort of putting it on his tape machine, recording his ideas and then sending it back to me, that doesn't make any sense. It just wouldn't make any sense at all.
Right.
But now in a day when I can just simply open up the very thing I'm talking to you on and sort of noodle away, and then ship it over, is like, it's quite astounding, really, how far we've come. It's changed my outlook on all of it anyway. I mean, with Slash, and in a lot of ways, for me, my most comfortable way is getting together with guys and just bashing out arrangements and bashing out ideas and bashing out tunes. But that said, with stuff like the Minefield record and whatnot, it's very common, where someone has written some music and they ask you to come up with some lyrics and some vocals for it anyway, which is that sort of collaborative thing where it's not necessarily you're in a room together going, okay, well, I'm going to sing this. It's more like you go home and, put your thinking cap on and try and write some lyrics and come up with some stuff. So that's essentially what Monsters, whether it was Heroes and Monsters or Minefield or any points in between, really. I mean, it's essentially what Miles does with the Slash stuff when he's sitting at home, kind of coming up with melodies and lyrics and then brings it into an actual studio. So the difference is that when I'm doing it here, the studio is right here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do have that Minefield record, by the way, in my collection over there.
Oh, so, thank you. Well, I really enjoyed so much of that. And again, it's like one of those things where that song Alone Together, which is one of my favorite songs I've ever been a part of, it would not have existed had that not happened. And I think that the same goes for Heroes and Monsters, and the same goes for this thing with Tracy I'm doing. This music would not have existed if we didn't have this horrible thing happen. I mean, it's the only silver lining to that whole situation.
Yeah, I think it definitely, and it definitely gave, the opportunity for creativity that wouldn't have happened because you wouldn't have been off the road to be able to even do anything. There'd have been 1,000 things going on. So, with every tragedy comes a silver lining. And I think the silver lining in that was there's a ton of music that got pumped out and some great creativity and great, collaborations that occurred during that time that, to your point, would have never happened had, you're not
there's no way
have some downtime. You just
there's no way guys like Will and Steph and I would have been able to find time. It's just like in our regular lives when things were normal, there's just not really a window of opportunity to really make that happen. Now, of course, with the world sort of reopened and back to somewhat normal, now it is a matter of like, okay, well, we was like I had a child with another woman on the side or something. It's kind of, yeah. Now I got to kind of figure out what to do, like with this sort of other family, and it's one of those things okay, well, now we find windows of opportunity. Like in February, we're going to run out to Italy for 10 shows. And then, and then we'll have to wait and see if there's another window that is accommodating. Cause I mean, Evanescence is a busy band. Vasco Rossi has a very busy spring and summer kind of thing. And that's sort of the way it goes. I mean, and then I have my stuff going on. So it's sort of, you just have no idea what's going to, how to make this all work. But I say that of pretty much all the projects that I'm involved in. It's like, I don't know. I will have to figure it out when the windows of opportunity present themselves.
But I think for me as a fan and somebody that likes to go to those kind of things, it makes those that much more special. Because you're not going to be able to go wherever and see, to see certain bands because there are those kind of one-off things. For example, a group of us went to see Accept, in Nashville.
Yeah,
and that was one of those things. They didn't come anywhere close. I live in Indiana, just south of Indianapolis, so they weren't coming anywhere close to us. And so it was like, in order for me to be able to see, Wolfie and to see those guys and see Phil and those guys, I had to go. But it was a special night, that was it. That was the opening night of the show. I've been to hundreds of shows and I've never been to an opening night of a tour. And even though it was a club tour kind of thing, it was badass. There's no other word to describe it.
I bet. Yeah. No, it's funny to me because, it's somewhat, as a guy who was there in real time and loved Motorhead and the Ramones and lived for those bands, those bands that were, were around, I mean, like that mm-hmm. Now we sort of look back and kind of go, damn, I mean, how many times did I go, I'll go see him next time I'm busy. And I could be said for, I never saw Prince, I mean, like I never saw quite a few artists that I was like, and then Prince is gone. You're like, oh wow, there goes that. I mean, I never had that opportunity. And there's something to be said about like, I'm a big believer in those bands like Cheap Trick who are just around our whole life. As long as I can remember, Cheap Trick is they're playing somewhere tonight. You know what I mean? Like they're just around. And I believe that you should see those bands as often as you can. Because one day, as we're witnessing in real time, all of our heroes are getting older and some of them are retiring, some of them are not around. And you have to. So, but the specialized thing of like a Heroes and Monsters where it's kind of like, this is it. These 10 shows might be it. I don't know if we can make anything else happen in 2023, but this is the opportunity. So I'm thinking that although it's in Italy, we have friends in France and Hungary and the UK and Sweden and Finland and all over the place that I'm hoping that people will be able to make the trip, because it's a hell of a lot easier to go to Italy within Europe than it is to come to, Vegas or Indiana. You know what I mean? So it's so that's the cool thing about Europe is that people will travel. It's a 3-hour train ride, and you're like suddenly in like a three countries over. It's like but yeah, it's I'm really excited about it. It's going to be fun. It's interesting for me because I haven't played in a power trio since I was in high school, or since my very first band we were a 3-piece. I was a singer bass player, so I never really thought about that till I started doing these conversations. I was like, yeah, they keep saying 3-piece, power trio, Rush, take your pick of all your favorite King's
Triumph,
X,
Triumph,
the Police, and I go, yeah, I mean, to me, it's there's something sort of legendary about a 3-piece band. Blue Cheer, I mean, it goes back as far as you can remember. And then we all remember how like genius Rush was, not just musically, but the fact that they thought to themselves, 3 guys means 3 hotel rooms, 3 flights, 3 plane tickets. It's like, oh, those guys are genius. They split the money 3 ways. Wow. I mean, it's like when you consider all the other ways to do business, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I'm quite excited to get on stage with it.
Yeah, that'll be cool. Hopefully we get some video from that. That'd be cool to definitely get some.
I think that's inevitable in this day and age. Yeah, you really can. It's half the reason, we talk about like, I'm the kind of person, like, I don't care that people have cameras out. That's cool. But they do kind of go, well, yeah, but what if it's a bad night, or what if it's this, or what if it's that? I go, well, then just don't have bad nights, I guess, or just do,
and people do, you have a bad night. Yeah. I have a bad day at work. I mean, it's slightly different, right?
Yeah. And I suppose it'd be different if that day at work was on YouTube the next day. Yeah.
It's, I think it's just the ability for people to give people rope, right? To be able to just, to understand that, and hell, stuff happens. I mean,
it does.
Even bands that have been around for years can have off nights that
Absolutely.
things don't go right, or, something happens. Who knows?
Absolutely.
And it, I think everybody does a, pretty good job of walking on stage and trying to set everything else back, and that performance is what's there. But it's life, and sometimes life gets in the way, and it gets in your head, and people, it happens.
It's really the only like how where there's so much talk about being present, being present in a conversation, being present at dinner with your family and kind of all that. I find it's the easiest place in the world to be present is on stage, because you're in this moment. You're up here for 90 minutes, half an hour, 40, whatever your designated time is. And this is it. It's like you go from the first song, the intro, into the first verse, into the chorus. Like everything is sort of happening and unfolding as you're doing it. You really don't have any other choice but to be present. And you can't, although you can kind of like check out a little bit, because you're not like sitting there going like 1, 2, 3, 4. You're not super hyper like aware, but you are, as a singer especially, you're like hyper aware of the lyrics, you're hyper aware of everything else, and you're talking to the audience, all that kind of stuff. You are so present that it's probably the most zen time of my life is on stage. There are times where I'm literally like, can't wait to get on stage just to get away from the stuff. Like I'll be backstage and there'll be a million people back there talking your ear off, and you'll be, which I love. I'm a very social guy, but there are times where you just want to go on stage, focus on the business at hand, and and just get on with it, you know. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. To me, I think it's the most sort of like, you're in that moment with this entire room full of people, and we're all in this together, and here we go, you know.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about Heroes and Monsters. So
Sure.
how long, just was that a long period of time to make that record? I mean, you talked about some dates earlier, and so was it about a year total over the span of time?
I would say so. I mean, you know, in terms of actual recording it, maybe not. You know, we kind of we would sort of write and record as we were going along, because a lot of it was sort of you know, and even then it would depend on what, you know, because we all had other things on our plate as well that we had to kind of, you know, even though we were during COVID, we had other things that we were doing as well. So it's one of the weird things that happens when you don't have a sort of quote unquote record company or management or any of that kind of stuff, where people designate this 3 months, you're going to finish this record, you know. So what ends up happening is when there's no, you know, real sort of timeline, you can just sort of run around. But eventually, once we got involved with Frontiers and all that, then it started to put into, you know, implement a time frame and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely came up during COVID, and it's weird to be, you know, that, because enough time goes by with any project you're working on, recording and whatnot, that you will finish the recording, master and mix it, and then it'll sort of sit in stasis, waiting for the moment to put it out, waiting for what's the right time. A lot of it, I mean, even like with the last Slash record we did, had similar issues, more based upon like, well, when do we release this thing? Because it was COVID, you know, I mean, like up until, well, we put it out early 2022. So it was still like, you know, touring in a bubble and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, when you put it out, you want to be able to kind of at least maximize any opportunity you have to tour it, to play shows, to do all that kind of stuff. And if you can't do that because of COVID or whatever other reason, then, you know, it's kind of, what's the point? But so yeah, it definitely was probably about a year, I would say. It was somewhere in 6 months to a year into the lockdown that we started to talk, and then there's sort of a writing process, and then, you know, recording and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, it takes a minute to get these things together.
Yeah. Well, I've heard the record. I mean, I've listened to it a couple of times. Listened to it again this morning. Very interesting. I'm one of those guys that if you don't get me at the opener, I'm done.
Yeah, you know, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah.
I just, you know, I have friends of mine that are like, yeah, but the second song's better than the first song. I'm like, if you can't hook me at the first song,
I know.
I don't have time.
And track 7's a keeper. Yeah, I know. It's tough.
Too bad.
Yeah, I know. I know what you mean.
You should have made that be number one.
Yeah, I know. That's the tough thing. Yeah.
But Locked and Loaded that's a great opener, man. The riff is great. You. I mean, it's just a great song. What's your favorite song on the record? Do you have one that's like really stands out that you're?
It sort of changes. I mean, like, you know, as time, you know, like anything, when you're sitting on a record for a while, you kind of, you know, there's elements of Locked and Loaded that are my favorite, only because it was the very first thing we actually put together, you know, collectively put together. But it was, you know, it was so heavy and so aggressive in a way that I don't really get to lean into a lot, especially as a vocalist. And it was kind of like, well, I'm just going to, like, you know, I remember Brian Johnson just saying, like, when he had the opportunity to sing on Back in Black, he just said, well, I'm just going to sing as high and as hard and as loud as I can and see what happens, you know, because he had no idea how he was going to be received being the guy who replaced Bon Scott. So I kind of felt like that too, where it's kind of like, you know, even though it's things like Took, people know me as a vocalist, but in a much larger perspective of the world, people still think of me as the bass player for Slash. So even though I've sang a few songs within that as well, I just thought, well, I'm just gonna, you know, just go for it. And, like, you know, if you know, in a year from now I'm just a bass player, I don't mean just a bass player, because that's not what I mean, but you end up being, like, you know, just back to being the bass player in whatever. It's kind of like, that's great. I mean, I'm one of those guys, I just wanted to be in a band. I never even really wanted to be a singer. I was happy to be in a band and, like, play with some guys, and then next thing you know, well, you sing one, and then, well, sing another one. Then next thing you know, you're the singer, and you're like, hey, wait a second, I didn't want to be the singer. But with this, you know, when it comes to the songs, things like "And You'll Remain," the very last song, has really become, which is weird, because when you talk about the first song, the very last song is this sort of acoustic, Zeppelin-y, moody thing that really, really, really kind of feels, I mean, for lack of better words, important, because we couldn't quite figure out where to put it on the record in terms of, sequencing, because it was such a moment that it was like, well, what if it just closes the record? Like it's the ending credits of a film, and it seemed to work perfectly there. I think that, Raw Power, I Knew You Were the Devil, those songs are total rockers and right up my alley. So there's a lot. And like I say, you ask me in a month from now and I'll be, oh, Let's Ride It and Blame. Those are ones for me. Or
yeah, actually,
wrong.
Yeah, one of my favorites on the record though right now is "Break Me, I'm Yours." Just a great song. I mean,
a lot of people bring that one up. Yeah,
yeah.
That was sort of, I mean, it has elements of what they would call like throwback kind of, but to me it felt like we in this day and age don't need to be too worried about like rules, when it comes to like this has to be this or this has to be that. As a guy who lived through the 90s in real time, when things became uncool, and so a lot of the things we all yeah, we all lived through that. What was kind of like, stuff that we loved, even though I understood it, and I was young enough to kind of like totally roll with like all the new music that was coming at us too. I still am very much in love with a lot of that, but I just kind of feel like, here in the 21st century, being grown ass man, we can just do whatever the hell we want, and so there is a little give and go from say Locked and Loaded and Raw Power into Break Me, I'm Yours. It sort of has a bit more of a AC/DC, I guess what they would, a little slight lean into what you would call more of an 80s vibe. And I'm unashamedly like, yep, that's kind of what we were doing. Yeah.
Purposefully.
And it was, yeah, it was kind of like, well, either you're going to lean into it or just run away from it. And in a lot of ways, I don't even know if it was really going to make the record, but it had gotten such a positive response that we kind of felt like, hey, you have to lead with your strengths. You know what I mean? If people like it, that's great.
So when you're making a record like that, and so this has got 10 songs on it, but you got 13 or 14 songs. It is the decision on what goes on the record necessarily, do you put some of those ones that you're kind of like, I'm not really sure if this is on the record? Do you give those to friends and say, hey, listen to this, what are your thoughts? Do you get feedback from other folks, or is it like the band just makes the decision on what's going to be there? Do you do any of that kind of stuff?
It was pretty insular, actually. I think we actually didn't really spend a lot of time worrying about what other people thought. It was just sort of, I think that, anything that didn't make it for whatever reason, like we collectively weren't feeling that strong about it, or it just didn't feel finished, or it didn't feel as strong as other material. And that's the way records are made. It's unfortunate that a lot of stuff can get left behind, but a lot of that stuff that gets left behind usually turns into something down the line. Right. And that's kind of where, with this record, it was sort of, because the other side of it too is trying to curtail a vibe of what these 10 songs, because everybody has a game plan. They go into making a record. We're going to do this kind of record, and it sort of finds its own voice and its own face anyway. Yeah. So we, in doing that, we sort of became, and then you carve out what are going to be the 10 songs. Well, then it's a big question mark of like, well, it could be this, it could be that. And if you pick these 10 songs, it's this kind of record. If you pick these 10 songs, it's this kind of record. But I liked the record to be a little bit, not 10 versions of the same song. You know what I mean? Like, then you throw on Set Me Free by Sweet, and it's sort of a different version of the, of the other songs. In reality, there's a little, some ups and downs and some places to go, which I think is important. I think it's you have to have that in the course of a record. And, we look back at old Zeppelin records and stuff like that. They're never the same song twice. You have a Stairway to Heaven. You have a Black Dog. It's like, that's the nature of a great record to me.
Yeah. You want to be taken on a journey. You don't want to really,
I think so.
Yeah. You don't really want to just have the same repetitive. That's not what it's not what we're looking for. It's not what the people are looking for anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I understand in the thrash world or something like that, where you literally want to just be pummeled for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever. And I totally understand that. That's totally different. I grew up on Motorhead and all that too, and that's exactly what it was. But For this kind of thing, we just kind of felt like, we would like to literally take people on a trip, on a little bit of a journey, a little bit of an epic ride, and hopefully come out the other side and have had an experience, as opposed to, you never know in this day and age, because you and I come from a generation of people who would sit and listen to an entire record.
Mm-hmm.
And now we sort of fight with a world that might listen to the first 10 seconds of the first song and move on to the next thing. I don't know. But I don't really think about that. I don't really think about like trying to make music for people who don't really want to listen to records. I make music for people who want to listen to records, people who want to listen to delve in. And like you said, with the one first song, if it doesn't grab you, I can admit there are a lot of records that sometimes ended up being some of my favorites that didn't grab me the first time,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you don't allow that, well, especially back in the days of CDs and cassettes, when you would sit in your car and just have it playing, sometimes it would take like, my third trip in my car to go like, hey, this song's pretty cool, actually, And I think that we don't really live in a society that allows for that anymore. So,
well, I think it has to do with that. I think for me, at least, it has a lot to do with emotion and,
totally.
what songs bring out in you and where you're at and what's going on around you when you're listening to that specific thing. Because you could listen to the same song twice, to your point, and one time not have any reaction to it at all, and the next time go, damn, that just hit. That is like right on the money.
And sometimes that can be way after the fact. There are songs that have been around since I was a kid that I just didn't pay attention to. And then you have some life experience and you hear a song on the radio and go, wow, this is a really deep song. Like I never thought of it until you'd been through heartbreak or you'd been through some hard time. And all of a sudden now this song from the 60s or something will speak to you. It's just, that's the coolest thing about music. And I think that's, in the same way that your reaction to a song could be different than my reaction to a song, where it's your favorite song in the world. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool. But then I'll have my favorite song and you're like, yeah, it's okay. Or it's terrible or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the coolest thing about music, and not unlike food, I suppose, where someone can enjoy a meal and someone go, it's just not for me or whatever, and you go, okay, well, but I think that, with a record like this, trying to kind of like, it's not like you're trying to like throw a bunch of things into the pot going, well, if they don't like this, maybe they'll like this. And if they don't like that, well, maybe they'll like this. It's kind of more like, this is just a bunch of shades from of colors that we do. So hopefully hopefully you find something in there that you like.
Yeah. Do you have a time? Do you have a hard stop?
No, I don't actually.
I wasn't sure. I've got a few more minutes, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to keep you over if you had another.
No, you're the last of the day. So yeah.
Hey, I win. That's all right. So what does 2023 look like for you? I know you said you're going to Europe or going to Italy. So what else is on? Is there anything else on the docket?
Yeah, Took has a lot going on. We are supposed to do the Monsters of Rock in April. We're doing the Monsters of Rock in April cruise. And then Tracy Guns and I have a project coming out in the fall. So that's keeping me very busy. And then when I'm home, I do Raiding the Rock Vault with my friends over at the Rio showroom over there. So, it's kind of one of those things where I just like to be busy. It's like I'm always sort of, yesterday I was just recording a bass for my friend he was in Saigon Kick, and he's got an album coming out, and it's really fantastic. So I just played bass on a song for him, and I got another project coming up to read a chapter from my friend's book. It's like I'm always doing something, and I think it's good to just kind of keep plowing forward, because it's sort of it's I keep saying to my friends, look, man, it's like the record industries or the music industries crazier every year. Like it's like, no one's buying records anymore, and now there's COVID. It's like, so you're kind of like, I just keep saying, like, if you're lucky enough to be making a living doing this, then you're a success. You have made it. And I hope that we can all kind of everybody can appreciate that, because I certainly do.
Yeah, great. That's a great way to end this, man. That's a great little note at the end. So Todd, I really appreciate your time today. Don't hang up. I want to just get us off here real quick, chat for another second.
You got it.
Thank you very much. Hey, tell people where they can find you and where they can find more information about, Heroes and Monsters.
Well, I'm Todd Kerns on everything except Twitter, Todd Dammit Kerns. Heroes and Monsters, the band, you can find on online. Check us out on Frontiers Records. If you Google that, I'm sure you'll find our information. The record drops on January 20th, so it's coming fast.
Cool. All right, man. Hang out
Thank
just
you
a
so
second.
much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Ages of Rock podcast. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and most importantly, tell all your friends. Remember, you're never too old to rock. Until the next episode, peace out, folks.